Is everybody taking their seat? I wanted to once again thank Anastasia with the help for all of her help with this event. Thank you. And Anastasia asked me to pass along. There's people standing on the sides, and if you could help us out, if you could try and find a seat in the interior, that would help us know if we need to add an extra table or just on the side. If you could try and find a seat in the interior, that would help us out. All right, terrific. Well, thanks to our efficiency this morning, we've got a little extra time for our two panels this morning. And it's my pleasure to turn it over to Julie Thorstenson, who's the Executive Director of the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society for our
Julie Thorstenson. Malakota, Wakpawashte, Mataha, Dayahiye, Wopila, Changa West, Chia, good morning. Hello, my relatives. My name is Julia Thorstenson. My Lakota name is Saami. I am Lakota, a citizen of Cheyenne Sioux Reservation, a nation in central South Dakota, which is and I'm also the executive director. And I thank Les for his singing song. I think anytime we hear the language, hear the drumbeat, that we're still here, and it also reminds people that we are still here. So I think it's very appropriate that we start today with hearing words from original caretakers. So the theme is Indigenous and local communities and voices of place Indigenous local perspectives on wildlife conservation and shared landscapes. Today we'll be listening about wildlife and large landscapes as they move across ecological, jurisdictional, and cultural boundaries. This session highlights the perspectives of local and tribal leaders whose communities are deeply connected to the lands and species they help steward. Speakers will explore how place-based values, long-term relationships with wildlife and lived experiences inform management approaches and support meaningful collaboration across diverse and dynamic landscapes. And it is fits in with Indigenous values and beliefs. Tribes are important allies in conservation. With an office at Fort Washakie on the Wind River Indian Reservation, we are able to work with tribal elders and tribal leadership to obtain firsthand knowledge of how tribal sovereignty can play a role in the management and protection of the ecosystem, and how we can utilize the technical and administrative strength of the GYC to support mutual efforts. Wes utilizes some of the knowledge and experiences he attained as a citizen of the Eastern Shoshone Business Council. While in the council, Wes served on the Shoshone and Arapaho Fish and Game Committee. The committee worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to develop fisheries and wildlife management plans for the reservation. It is an important exercise of not only tribal sovereignty, but also an important component of the nation-to-nation relationship that exists between tribes and the United States as established by treaty. So please help me welcome Wes.
Good morning, Native America. What a great day. You know, we've got a government shutdown, but they're not going to shut us down, right? And I really appreciate Chip being here this morning. Ho, Chip, for your comments, and appreciated your words of advice and wisdom there. So I'm going to try to figure this out. I need help. Okay, so I just need to push the button here. Okay. As was mentioned, I work for the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. And The mission of the coalition is to protect the land, waters, and wildlife of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And that's a really good fit into Indigenous values and beliefs, because the greater Yellowstone ecosystem was a very important and sacred place for a lot of tribes, and it still is. And we always want to make sure that it's an area that's protected and safe and always recognized for all of the power and energy that it brings to us. And so this really is an important part of how we work and how we try to work with our communities. The Greater Yellowstone Coalition is a regional conservation organization based in Bozeman. We've got 5 field offices strategically placed in Idaho, Wyoming, and on the reservation. We create opportunities to work with all people to protect the land, waters, and wildlife of the 28 million acre Greater Yellowstone ecosystem now and for future generations. For more than 40 years, GYC and our supporters have advocated for a science-driven, collaboration-focused, and forward-thinking approach to keeping land, wild, rivers free, flowing, and iconic wildlife moving throughout a connected and vibrant landscape. Indigenous people have stewarded Greater Yellowstone's lands, waters, and wildlife since time immemorial. The exclusion of Native voices and perspectives within the Western conservation movement has caused harm to Indigenous communities and the ecosystem alike. Today, the Greater Yellowstone Coalition is working with tribal partners to elevate Indigenous voices and protect the cultural, spiritual, and ecological integrity of Greater Yellowstone. You know, when I first got hired, we met with Superintendent Shawley and the Yellowstone staff, and giving us a good explanation of all of his operations. And one of his biologists, his head biologist, she got up and she said, we try to use the best available science in our conservation and management practices. And so at the end of the session, I told her, I was really glad to hear you mention that you use the best available science, because that's something that we can all see and agree upon or figure it out. I said, but there's some things that can't be explained by science, and so that's why you need Indigenous voices. And so that's really where we try to bring in and represent the Indigenous voice. Wind River, we're part of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. That's Yellowstone and the gray area up in the corner, and then this brown area down here in the bottom is the reservation. Does this have a pointer on it? Oh yeah. Greater Yellowstone, this is Yellowstone, and here's the reservation. Shoshone National Forest is between us and Yellowstone. There's about 42 miles right here. And so we're part of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We have 138,000 acre roadless area up in this part of the reservation. And so I believe that's a very important part of this whole area. And here at Wind River, we have on the western range, we have the Wind River Range. And then on our northern boundaries, we have the Owl Creek Range. And because of, the habitat and the pressure on other areas, we're getting a lot more grizzlies in the Wind River or the Owl Creek Range up on our northern boundary, and we're getting a lot more wolves and mountain lions up in the Wind River Range. Here on our reservation, we have 265 lakes. Most of them are up here in the Wind River Range and this part of the area. We have 1,108 miles of rivers and streams. We have 5 major aquifers. And so this is part of our work as the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, working with the reservation. What's our place in this ecosystem? What do we bring to this? How do we help protect and manage this precious area? Our worst research shows there's 49 tribes with ancestral affiliation to Yellowstone. And so even though most of those tribes are not actually in the GYE, they all claim very important affiliation to Yellowstone. It's an area where we come and gather. There's plants and foods and medicine that only grow in Yellowstone. And just when you're there, just when you get into that area, you can feel the power. You can feel the energy. You can feel that force that's there. And that's what Indigenous people have been proud of and part of for centuries, being able to enjoy and protect that area. So we do our best to try to work with those 49 tribes. Part of our work as Greater Yellowstone and being a member of the Business Council for many years, a lot of our community members don't understand our governance. Wind River, we're very unique. We have 2 separate tribes, 1 reservation, no constitution. And when I was on the tribal council, we used to try to encourage business and industry and meet with a lot of folks. But when we'd be sitting with them and when they hear those 2 words, no constitution, you could kind of see their eyes glaze over. It's like, how do you deal with 2 tribes with no constitution? And so that's part of the effort that we're trying to help others understand. The other part that I was on the council for 20 years. The other part that concerns me, a lot of our tribal members don't understand our own governance. How do we deal with our government with no constitution? We've got 2 separate councils. They have their own separate programs and activities. And then we have to meet jointly. 2 tribes meeting jointly on water, land, taxation, energy, environment, zoning, those issues that are joint, that include the both tribes. So that's really the emphasis that we have to press on for our tribal members, is that as tribal governments and leaders, we have a big role to play. And how do we do that? And so we work quite a bit with tribal leaders. When I first got in the council, we got 2 councils, and we still work with them. We get on their agenda as much as we can, letting them know what we're doing, why we're doing it. Because a lot of tribes don't put full faith and trust in nonprofits. And so that's really kind of a challenge for us as nonprofits, is how do we work with tribes? Because the mission of the coalition, protecting lands, waters, and wildlife, fits right into traditional beliefs. So we think there's a nice fit there, but we got to figure out all the other areas and how do we make that connect. So we've got our buffalo pasture that we're almost up to 300 head of buffalo on our res, and we're really working with the schools and our elders, and really impressing upon them the importance of buffalo in our daily lives and in our future. We work quite a bit with the elders and the tribal historic preservation programs, trying to encourage and recognize the importance of, connecting our various topics and discussions to the language. One of the first things that we started to do, and when I got hired, was we went to each tribe to make sure we always included the elders. And one of the sad things that's for right now is that just the past few years we've lost some of the elders that we've connected with, and a lot of reservations right now, they don't have as many elders as they used to. So that's really an important part of those of us that have some experience and knowledge to share. It's important we get connected to the elders. So we've always worked with them to make sure that they're leading us in every action. Every meeting we have, we start off with our elders, and we have them up front with us to make sure that all of our people that are out there, recognize the importance and the input of our elders. We work quite a bit with University of Wyoming. This is, one of the things that I have been dealing with when I was on the council, and we still deal with this, is, as tribes, we don't have a strong scientific presence. We don't have hydrologists and biologists and botanists and these other geologists and these other scientific and technical capabilities. So that's why the University of Wyoming, the Hobbs School of Environment and Natural Resources, the High Plains American Indian Research Institute. Teresa's here from High Plains. Raise your hand, Teresa. School of Energy Resources, the law school, It's very critical that we get our young people educated in science and technical areas because that backs up our culture and our tradition. When we have our young student out there along the river, teaching them about how we respect the river, how we honor the river, how we make offerings to the river, how we pray to the river, how we honor that river. When we have our young students out there and our elders and telling them that on one side, on this side, we want a hydrologist talking to them about acidity and pH and nephelometric turbidity units and all this technical kind of terms that I have trouble even pronouncing, right? So, that's really an area that's so critical for us. So that's when Hobb and UW and they have these kinds of activities, we try to participate, we try to learn, we try to help, because that's what we're looking for ourselves. We need that strong scientific and technical presence to continue to move forward. And today, we've got our federal government is shut down. Kind of a dark day, but we still have so much to be thankful for. Look at this beautiful country we live in. The beautiful air we breathe, that cool air wakes you up and gets you going. That's what we're trying to preserve and protect. So this is, working with, the university and other colleges in our region. A lot of the other areas too we work with is the federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, Forest Service, BLM. When tribes sign treaties with the United States, there's a very unique legal and political relationship between tribes and the United States established by treaty. And so that's what we're trying to make sure that's always maintained and protected. We have a signed by treaty. Our current administration doesn't even want to recognize treaties, doesn't even want to recognize the Constitution, doesn't want to recognize tribal sovereignty. There's 574 federally recognized tribes in this country. And that's part of the work that we're doing as GYC. We're connecting with some of those tribes. Those 49 tribes that you've seen on the map. We're meeting with the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council. We're meeting with the Great Plains Tribal Leaders Alliance. Last month we met with the Council of Large Tribes because tribal sovereignty, tribal treaty rights are an important fight in conservation. And so that's why, as conservationists, as NGOs, and Native American Fish and Wildlife Society, that tribal sovereignty and those treaties, that's our power, that's our strength. That's our power. We have to always honor and recognize that and make sure the federal government honors and recognizes that. And that's quite a challenge sometimes. We work with climate scientists, Teton Science School. We're really working on STEM. STEM, S-T-E-M, right? That stands for science, technology, environment, and mathematics. It's really trying to point our young children in the direction of getting technical and scientific education. So STEM is very critical to our operations and to our future for tribe. So we work with, that's one of the things we're working with Teton Science School and GYC and a couple of others is how do we really promote STEM activities on the res? We want to have big family intergenerational gatherings where we bring grandma and grandpa and aunties and uncles and brothers and sisters and that student and all of these technical people and other people and our elders telling them we need biologists, we need hydrologists, we need scientists, we need doctors, we need economists. And so that's really an important push. And this is really, we've been holding the youth climate and culture camps and trying to bring all of these people together and bring our young people together. The first culture and climate camp we had about 3 years ago. And we had a bunch of students here. There's probably about 80 students. You can see some of them sitting out there. We had teachers and advisors. And then we had, the federal agencies. But I asked one of our elders to pray And in our traditional way, you know, we when we go up to our elders, we approach them in a manner that reflects that respect, and then we make offerings to them. And nowadays, maybe we give them a blanket or a few dollars or some sweet grass or something like that. But so I went to our elder, and the traditional way, when we approach our elders and they're sitting down, we put our hands over their head. And I asked her to pray. Pray for what we're doing here. Pray for our buffalo. Pray for our children. Pray for yourself, I told her. And when she started praying, and we thought all the buffalo were way down on the other end of the area, and when she started praying, this buffalo just walked up on the ridge here, and not very far. And for those of us that believe in our indigenous ways, this was the most powerful, important blessing we could have ever received. And that's what the elder said. She said, I was so glad you brought me out here to pray and when that buffalo came. And she said, he recognized the Shoshone language. That's why he came over. And so all of the elders that were there, and we have a station for all of them, they were just all so thankful for this buffalo coming. They said, that shows that the buffalo is supporting what we're doing. He came here to show us that he's with us, that he supports what we're doing. And so that was the most awesome blessing we could have ever asked for. This is part of our group, Wind River Range in the back, where we're getting more wolves, right? And this is the 5th graders, but this was just a real fun activity. You know, that's Kurt Imhoff. He's our hydrogeomorphologist. I couldn't even pronounce that initially, but you know, and that's the hydrogeomorphologist. He's teaching our kids good things about our river and riparian habitat and all of that. So this is really Sierra, one of our GYC. They're helping our kids. And so this is just really, you know, working some fun activities and forming activities for the kids. The Rapo language, Tipo, you know, teaching tongues and tell them a little bit about some of our history. Cooking up some food, cooking up some, they were cooking up some buffalo meat and some other berries, and boy, they were feeding us pretty good out there. You know, this is one of our elders, and the one lady that just really enjoying herself at that time, she just went home about a month ago. We just buried her about a month ago, and you know, this is really the feeling that we have when we're out there. It's just an enjoyable activity, and you know, it really hits us hard when we have to send some of our elders home. And the work we've been doing, we've had sent about 4 or 5 of our elders home just in the past 3 years. But when we go to our elders, when I went to them, I told our elder, we want you to be our leaders. We want you to be our teachers. We want you to be our advisors. We want you to be at every meeting to start us off and help us get going on all of this. So we really put a lot of respect and faith in our elders. More activities. This is Grand Teton National Park. You can see talking to our kids about all the things that are going, and you know, forest service, park service. You know, that's really essential for us to maintain that government to government, nation to nation relationship. And so right now, Forest Service, biologists, and botanists, we'll be depending on you till we get our own. So that's that nation-to-nation relationship. And how do we work with federal agencies, and how do we bring that to helping our young kids? This is the Arapaho lesson. Ray, young chief, talking about, you know, some of the issues important to language. This is another area, one of our, I think this is one of the state park service people that came out and visited with us and got some activities going with the kids. One of the things that I really have been focusing on is, like I said, I really believe it's important to educate our people. And I said, Wind River is very unique. And so we come up with this grassroots to governance. And like I said, our elders are the first ones that we always include. We approach the elders, you know, explain our water and buffalo alliance, our tribal codes, and we share, and we told our elders, we want you to be our leaders, our teachers, our advisors. And, our elders, that we talk to them, and the first thing they always pass on to us is that the minute we could start talking and understanding things, we were always raised to respect nature. That's the initial statement that all these elders give. We was always raised to respect nature. And so how do we reinstill that? How do we strengthen that? So that's our task and our job at GYC. So we have our elders, and then I talked about our young people. We need to talk to them about the history of the res and show them maps. STEAM, science, technology, environment, art, and mathematics. Your indigenous teachings, and then, the various age groups. When we had our camps, one day we had fifth graders, one day we had eighth graders, and then the third day we had seniors in high school. So we kind of got a nice cross-section of students, but now we've got to get more and start working directly in the schools, right? We have our scientists. We need to have hydrologists and geologists and, all of that scientific and technical information, talking about a hydrologic cycle and riparian habitat and the plants, foods, and medicines that are out there. And we've got a couple of tribal organizations that are really doing a lot of work with that. This is the part that I like to focus on because I spent 20 years on the council, but we've got to understand our governance. The Treaty of 1863, the Eastern Shoshone Reservation was 44 million acres. It went for where we're at in west central Wyoming, down into Colorado, into Utah, and into Idaho, and back into here. 44 million acres. It didn't take the federal government very long to violate that treaty. The Treaty of 1868, they knocked us down to 3 million acres. So they stole about 40 million acres of land from us. And then when they knocked us down to 3.2 million, they stole another 700,000 acres in South Pass, south of our area, because there was a lot of gold out there. So they said, we got to get at that gold, so let's take some Indian land to do it. So that's kind of the way it goes. So this is really important. We got to understand these treaties. We got to understand our sovereignty. The Reclamation Act. Our reservation, 2.5 million acres, they opened up our land to homesteading after the treaty was signed. In 1905, the Congress passed the Reclamation Act, which was supposed to provide water and irrigation infrastructure for public lands. Public lands. And then they took our reservation and all the land north of the Big Wind River, which is about 1.4 million acres, they opened up 1.4 million acres of our land to homesteading after the reservation was signed. So that's the evil, deceitful types of actions that tribes face. And we're still facing that today. Senator Barrasso just introduced a bill last October to turn some more of our reservation land over to the non-Indian irrigation district. Get out of here, Senator Barrasso. That's reservation land. And so that's part of the education. That's part of the process. We've got to stand up and talk for ourselves. We actually had a protest at Senator Barrasso's office last October. He's got an office in Riverton, Wyoming. And so Greater Yellowstone Coalition, we have these informational meetings and community meetings. And so we start informing our tribal membership about Pilot Butte. That's what Barrasso called this bill, the Pilot Butte, the Pilot Butte Conveyance Act, the Pilot Butte Power Plant Conveyance Act. There's a power plant on this land and some of the land that goes with it. That's part of the reservation. And he introduced a bill to turn that over to the non-Indian. So we organized, and this was the first time there was ever organized opposition to a bill being introduced by one of our congressional delegations. And so we had a protest down at his office in Riverton, Wyoming. There was about 300 people that showed up, and they brought in a couple busloads of school children. And we had protest signs, and we had our drum groups out there, and we had a big, massive demonstration in front of Senator John Barrasso's office. But that didn't stop him. He still tried to introduce that bill. And in Congress, they have in a committee, they have what they call a voice vote. And normally they read this bill and nobody says anything and the bill passes. And so he tried to do this in one of the committees, the Senate Energy and Resource Committee, on a voice vote. And when the bill was read, Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota and Senator Heinrich from New Mexico, they both voted no. And it killed his bill. And so Barrasso went bonkers. He was on TV threatening the two senators that any bill you introduce is going to be dead on arrival. So that's really how we're working here on this grassroots to govern, how we want to make sure we educate our people, all surrounding Mother Earth. Indigenous teachings, relationship to nature, creeks and watersheds, water is life, river restoration, beaver dams, fisheries, buffalo, mapping, groundwater, TIPOs, all of these. That's what we're doing. You know, I tell my children and my grandchildren, and I said, you know, there's like 4 important areas here for our home and our community. Number 1, yourself. How do you respect yourself? How do you fit into the family? And so you really have to figure that, understand how you want to live your life. And then you live the family. You know, all of our teachings as we grew up, they would teach about how we respect our mothers, our grandmothers, our sisters, our extended families, and then our community. You know, we have our ceremonies, we have our activities, we have a lot of tribal gathering. In fact, tomorrow starts one of our most important ceremonies, the pipe fast, where people go on fast with our pipe. And then the tribe. So this is the 4 areas, walking the sacred path, that we as Indigenous people, this is what we're trying to connect and protect. You know, and I tell people we have 5 arrows in our quiver. We have a treaty. The Herrera decision gives us the right to hunt on the unoccupied lands of the United States. 48% of Wyoming is unoccupied lands. So I have the right to hunt on 48% of Wyoming right now. The Federal Indian Policies, Antiquities Act, National Historic Preservation Act. The National Historic Preservation Act, the regulations were written by Vine Deloria Jr. That gives us authority off reservation. Water rights. West of the Mississippi, tribes have senior rights to water. West of the Mississippi, tribes have senior rights to water. That's going to give us political and economic power that we never ever realized, but most of us aren't ready for it yet. We don't have the hydrologists and the botanists and the economists and the trustworthy attorneys to move forward to protect our water rights. Environmental standards. Tribes can adopt higher air and water quality standards than the state or federal government. And I've been telling our GYC board, if all the tribes in the Missouri River Valley Basin had the same water quality standards, we could protect the river. And so that's part of our effort, working with tribes and getting them to understand how we work with them, and, you know, protecting our lands and our waters, and making sure this is the area that I was talking about. This is that area that's on our reservation. That's the Federal Reclamation Project. There's about 111,000 acres of land in this project that's supposed to come back to the tribes, and that was some of that land that Barrasso was trying to give to the non-Indian irrigation districts. This is public lands and just a view of the indigenous lands and all the areas that they occupied at one time. This is public lands. All these lands that you see, I have hunting rights on those lands. 1868 treaty right. Signers, we have the right to hunt on the unoccupied lands of the United States. And so that's why I got the right to hunt on 48% of Wyoming. The roadless rural rescission, you know, there's a lot of things that we're helping tribes with. Roadless rural, public lands, buffalo, wolves, grizzlies, you know, all of the same old battles we've been fighting. So we just want to make sure, you know, we elevate tribal ancestral connections, support treaty rights, you know, restore, sustain cultural, community, and spiritual connections, walk in solidarity, work in solidarity, and then through sovereignty and self-determination, support tribal nations. And that's the work we're doing. That's what I tell people, that all we're trying to do is strengthen our families and our communities. Ho, thank you.
Ilama Ye, is this on? Hello? Is it on? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Wes. Our next speaker, sorry, is Åsa Larsson Blind. She is a Saami politician and community leader, a member of the Saami Council, where she previously held roles as both president and vice president. Åsa is raised in a reindeer herding family and has long been a voice for Saami rights and representation, from chairing the National Saami Association in Sweden to representing Saami interests internationally through the Arctic Council and UN climate negotiations. Her work focuses on Indigenous rights, climate justice, and sustainable development, with a strong commitment to advancing Saami self-determination and knowledge-based approaches to governance. She holds a master's degree in human resources management and development from the University of Umeå. Please help me welcome Åsa.
Ore päivi puhkaide. Alkos mohalhan tuodasti tan min wahpa ja velja ja singuluvas vuotta danetna mitä. Vastaus ena. At first, good morning everyone, good day. And at first I would like to recognize the peoples of this lands, our brothers and sisters and their nations of these lands. And the answer is land, as we like to say in Sápmi, vastaus ena. And thank you for the introduction. I will speak a bit about the situation in Sápmi, and as I thought coming here that you might not be that familiar with us, the Saami or our reindeer herding, so I will give a short introduction to us so you can put what I'm then saying about carnivore management into context. So I will see if I can manage this one. Okay, so when we refer to our homelands, Sápmi, that's these lands, and I don't have the acres. We don't really talk about acres that much, but this is the northern parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Kola Peninsula on the Russian side. So the Saami, we're an indigenous people that are divided by 4 nation states. We're indigenous to these lands. That means that we were here before they drew these borders. And a few words about the Saami Council that I represent. We are an NGO and we an indigenous peoples organization. And we have member organizations in all 4 countries where the Saami people live. So our goal is to work cross-border and to not let the state borders interrupt our peoples in being one people. Unfortunately, all collaborations with our peoples on the Russian side is paused at the moment due to the situation that we are all aware of. So that is causing difficulties for us as a people. Saami Council was founded in 1956, so that makes us one of the oldest still operating indigenous peoples organizations in the world. And we work with a rights-based approach to promote indigenous peoples' rights and cultures, both nationally at home in Sápmi, but also internationally under the UN, the Arctic Council, and the EU. And I was so glad to hear also Wes mention the best available science, and we usually talk about the best available knowledge. And we also do several and a lot of research collaborations. We contribute to research projects. We are also co-applicants in different research projects and collaborations. That is a very important part of our work also, to bring indigenous knowledge, and we have a few projects also of the co-creation of knowledge to bring in the indigenous knowledge in research. And a few words about the status of the Saami in Sweden. And I will say that I will focus on the situation on the Swedish side of Sápmi. So what I'm talking about with the carnivore management and the situation and reindeer herding, it's in the context of Sweden. So we were recognized by the state in 1977 as an indigenous people. And in 1993, we got a Saami parliament installed in Sweden. We also have a Saami parliament in Norway and in Finland. They operate nationally and part of the state system, but they are both government authorities assigned to Saami issues and Saami culture and livelihoods, but also publicly elected bodies for the Saami in the separate nations to elect their representatives. And in 2000, Sweden joined this European Council of Europe's Framework Convention on Protection of National Minorities. And we are also then acknowledged as one of the 5 national minorities in Sweden. And that has to say something about the policies towards Saami and also in protection of our cultures and languages. But it took until 2011, actually, before we were recognized in the constitutions. We were like stated as an indigenous people already in 1977, but in 2011, it was written in the constitution that we are a people. We have yet to see really the measures to follow that recognition, but we're slowly, hopefully getting there. And in 2022, it was adopted a law on consultation with the Saami people. And so that's fairly new, not so strong legislation. It doesn't require consent. So, but we hope that we can strengthen this legislation over time. So with this, when we compare to the situation here, we don't have the treaties. We don't have the formal recognition of ownership to our lands. But I will come into a bit about the reindeer herding. I'm from a reindeer herding family, and we have also other livelihoods within the Sami culture, hunting, fishing, handicraft, but reindeer herding is the largest of our livelihoods and also the foundation of our culture. And the reindeer herding right, it's based on customary use. So it's based on that we've been doing this for a very long time. And it's coded through legislation. So we have a Reindeer Herding Act that puts the framework to it, but it's not the legislation that is giving us the right. It's just regulating the right. That's important to note. And the reindeer herding, the right to herd reindeer are recognized as a property right, but it's not exclusive to the lands that we use. So it's parallel to other land users, and I will come to that. Here you can see the reindeer herding area in Sweden. So you see that it's pretty much of the surface of Sweden that is to some extent covered by reindeer herding and reindeer grazing. And it's organized in reindeer herding communities. And the reindeer herding communities are these geographic areas. And within those areas, the families belonging to that community can herd their reindeer and use those lands and waters for their subsistence. So hunting and fishing is included in that right. So you see that it's overlapping a large part of the surface of Sweden, and we also have then neighboring reindeer hunting communities in all directions. And you see that they are quite long, and that's because we migrate with the reindeer, and we follow them in their traditional ways of migrating between seasonal pastures. But we also have forest reindeer herding that are more stationary and are in the forest all year round, so they don't migrate the same distances. I will be speaking from an example of my reindeer herding community that is a mountain reindeer herding community, and we migrate quite far. So this is my reindeer herding community, and you see it's a far-stretched area. Up here is the Norwegian border. Down here is the sea, and here we have the town of Umeå. So just to give you a brief understanding about how it works, the reindeer herding year starts when the calves is born in May. And then we are up in the mountain area, and the herd is grazing freely. Saami reindeer herding is based on free grazing animals. So we fence them as little as possible, and it's based on them grazing freely in seasonal pastures. So then we have, in the spring and in the summer, all the community have their herds together. So in my community, it's approximately 10,000 animals altogether. And in the summer, we mark the calves. So we round up parts of the herd and we mark the calves. So all reindeer owners have their own mark, a combination of cuts in the ears that we do with knives, so we know who it belongs to. So in Sweden, there are no wild reindeer. So if you go to Sweden and you see a reindeer outdoors, it belongs to someone's herd. So that's the summer, and when the snow comes, October, November, the reindeer start moving towards the autumn and winter pastures. And then we round the herd up and we separate into winter pasture groups. It's family groups. So the community divide in smaller herds. And that's because we can't operate with such a large herd in the winter pastures. It's very fragmented and it's hard to migrate with a large herd. And then we move down to the winter pastures. And we can migrate by trucks. And that's also due to the fragmentation of landscape and the fragmentation of and the cutting off of our traditional migration routes. But we can also migrate by foot. And my family, we have our reindeer just outside the town of Umeå in the wintertime. So it's a migration of more than 300 kilometers each season. And then in March, April, when the snow starts to melt and the spring comes, then the reindeer start moving up again. And then we can migrate up to the summer pastures so that they arrive there in time to have their calves in mid-May. So here's a picture of our family group migrating with snowmobiles on a lake with our herd. And it looked kind of peaceful when I only had the borders of the reindeer herding community on the map. So just to give you, I will not talk a lot of this. This is a whole other seminar, but just to show you an example of what I told briefly about the overlapping land use. This is another reindeer herding community, the example of Gabna, and that's further north Here is the town. Oops, nope, sorry, no, going back. Here is Kiruna town. So here it's up north. So all these spots that you see and everything going on, that's competing land use. So they have one of Europe's largest iron mines. They have a railway. They have massive tourism, different seasons. They also have mines over here. It's a planned graphite mine over here. So it's not much of the reindeer herding community's surface that are without disturbance for reindeer to graze freely and without being disturbed by other land users. So this is to give you a context of the challenges of reindeer herding and the overlapping of other land use. So I will talk a bit about the management of large carnivores in Sweden, and giving you a perspective of the challenges it brings to the reindeer herding communities. So just a brief, it's based on, the management system is based on a system of national goals and then regional implementation. So the government sets the goals for population size, and we have several large carnivores. We have bear, wolves, wolverine, lynx, eagles, both golden eagles and also whitetail coming in from the ocean. So the government sets the goals for population size, and then we have the management coordination by the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's carried out then with regional decisions by the county administrative boards. So it's regionally managed, and the county administrative boards make the decisions for hunting licenses and the compensation. And those are the ones that are working closest to the reindeer herding communities. So that's where the operational management happens. And then we have a compensation system. You can imagine when the reindeer are grazing freely, they are exposed to large carnivores. So the system is supposed to be a preventive system. It's based on annual inventories to make the population estimates for each species. And then it's linked, the compensation is linked then to the presence of carnivores on the reindeer herding communities areas. And it's a difference with the compensation depending on if it's an occasional presence, occurrence, or if it's regular occurrence, if more stationary, and also if there is a documented family group of a predator species. And then there have been made these estimates of how much damage, if you say so, each species are doing to reindeer herding. Like how many reindeer a lynx kill for every year. And those numbers are made to estimate how much the compensation for the, oops, doing this wrong button again. Okay. So how much the compensation for each family group, for example, in each species, how much they are, the damage they do or the losses for reindeer herding. And then it is one tool that has been not implemented, but at least set, and that's a tolerance level for reindeer herding. And I want to talk a bit about the tolerance level because it's a set tolerance level nationally. It's said that reindeer herding communities are not to endure more than 10% losses to their herd yearly. So it's quite a big number. From reindeer herding, our own organizations, we've said that we can endure 5%. But 10% is put as a national political ambition. It's not formally decided, so it's not really enforced, but it is there as an ambition. But it's hard for reindeer herders to use that as a tool, and we have reindeer herding communities where we see losses of yearly calves up to 25–30% a year. So it's not really enforced, and it's not formally decided. So it's supposed to be a management tool, but it's not really used when it comes to the goals that are set to species. And it is a frustration when you see your reindeer killed, but it is a state management system saying that you cannot touch them. And then you have a tolerance level that is breached yearly. And then the obvious measure for us would be to try to reduce the numbers of carnivores on our pasture lands. But then there are national goals saying that we can't do that. So you see it's kind of a mismatch here. But I would like to say something about our view on these animals. Since we've been on these lands for such a long time, of course, the large carnivores and the predators, they're a part of the ecosystems. They've always been there. And there have been fluctuations, of course, in population size. We've also had when it comes to wolves, for example, the severe hunting. So it's not a matter of removing the predators from our lands. In the Saami culture, it's all about balance. We've been on these lands, and we're still here, and we want to give our children the opportunity to sustain themselves within the traditional livelihoods, also for coming generations. And for that, we need balance. And it's very hard now with the competing land use that are taking up a lot of areas that we could before use as alternative pasture lands. If we have an occurrence and we have a family group of lynx or wolverine, we could move away from them to a further extent that we can do now, because then it might be a windmill park or a mine or a city or a tourism resort on those lands. So we don't have the alternatives. And of course, climate change. I cannot talk about reindeer herding today without mentioning climate change, because we are seeing the effects of that every season, all year round now. And that, of course, poses a lot of pressure. And speaking of the generations, here in the picture, it's my father helping my daughter and advising her how to make the earmark in the calf. So that's the knowledge that is transferred by generation, and that's done by being out with the reindeer on the land. So. So the everyday situation for herders, that's to meet this when you go to tend the herd. So these are killed by a bear. And you see, this is a newborn calf. And when bear wakes up in the spring, it's calving season. So we have bear that have specialized in going up into the mountains and killing many newborn calves. And it's not much on a newborn reindeer calf for a bear to feed on. So they kill quite many of them. And there is a system so we can shoot problem individuals when we document damage. And this is a year-old calf, also killed by bear. This is done by a wolf. We're not supposed to have wolf in the reindeer herding area. And we have a saying in Saami culture that wolf is the worst. And that's due to not the amount of reindeer it kills, but how it operates, that it scatters the herd. So when it hunts, it scatters the herd so that it causes a lot of work for reindeer herders to try to keep the herd together when we have a wolf close by. And reindeer tend to be more afraid of the wolf. A lynx or a wolverine can be sort of in the herd and just pick one reindeer here and there, but a wolf, it scatters. So but we do have wolf occurrences every year, and we also in the southernmost part of the reindeer herding area have like established wolf packs, because we have the wolf population in Sweden are established south of the reindeer herding area, and they migrate a bit upwards. So the southernmost part of the reindeer herding area are exposed to wolves and also have them all year round. And this one is killed by an eagle. And you can see a bit of the wing marks here around the head. And of course, it's also a very stressful situation for herders to know that you have predators in the herd and don't really know what you're meeting when you go out to tend the herd. And for young herders, it's described also as psychologically stressful and hard to cope with, because it's also a frustrating situation when you feel that the system is not really taking your situation into consideration and your hands are tied. So, to sum up a bit what I've been saying, we have the situation with the national goals for the population size. We have the estimates for carnivore predation on reindeer. And we have the tolerance level. And then the compensation is set by a fixed budget every year. So that puts a roof on the highest amount that can be paid for compensation. And that's despite the need for compensation. And so then you can understand that it can be a discrepancy between the actually losses of reindeer and what you get compensated for the losses. And that does not do anything for the acceptance of this management system. Because when these discrepancies are there, it means that me and my family as reindeer herders, we pay for this management system from our own pocket. And that is, from my side, not acceptable. And that, of course, also affects our family business and our economic situation. So just looking at the way forward, I need to leave you with a nice picture of the reindeer after the... We would need the tolerance level to be fixed, formally decided. So that is something that we can rely on. And we need also the management system to recognize that the reindeer herding communities overlap. We have several reindeer herding communities within the regional management areas. So that does not mix, and that does not match. So we have work to do in finding a management system so that we can get acceptance for the level of predators within the reindeer herding area, and also give the reindeer herders the opportunities to continue with our traditional livelihood, and also to strengthen the economic foundation of our family businesses so that we can do what we want to do, tend to our reindeer, protect them, and ultimately, it is a meat production. We are supposed to live off of our herds. And the more reindeer killed by predators and not compensated, that also then diminishes the opportunities for us to live off of our herds. So we need the management system to recognize our indigenous rights. And we also need the clear links between the goals, the management's measures, and the actual outcomes within the reindeer herding areas. Gito, thank you.
I think we have time for some questions. If anybody has any questions? Here we go.
Do you have a figure of what the reindeer industry contributes to Sweden's GDP?
When we look at numbers, and we are a bit cautious in looking at numbers because we can never compete with large industries. And this is also one of the limiting factors because of the gray zone of killed reindeer to predators. But we are a very small, if you want to call it industry, because we're not only a business, we're indigenous livelihood. So this is one of our cultural parts of our culture that are building our society and our economics. So it's a lot of gray zone in that the reindeer herding is also subsistence for our families and our extended families. So not everything reaches the market. But we do depend now, due to all the competing land use limiting factors, usually on people in our families having other incomes. So it's very difficult today to live off of only reindeer herding.
Here.
Thank you. My question is for both Wes and also, what elements of what the Saami, the practices up there, do you believe could be used as a model for bison recovery in co-management with tribal nations in our country?
Relating co-management.
You know, a lot of what we're doing with the elders in the community is kind of the first big step. And then we're trying to understand some of the technical and scientific side, you know, veterinarian side of things. And, you know, and then how does the teachings of our elders and the inputs of our elders connect to that? And so, you know, just like anywhere else, we also have our internal conflicts. We have tribal ranchers that run cattle on the reservation. And so there's some opportunity there to kind of minimize some of that. The schools are really doing a lot of work with the students and, you know, helping them understand not only the spiritual and traditional connection, but the way we utilize the buffalo and all the different parts and, you know, all of the positive impacts of utilizing that. And for me, I try to tie it to our sovereignty, to our governance. How do we manage that? How do we control? How do we protect? How do we inform? And then, as I mentioned, the nation-to-nation relationship, we always want to make sure we connect with federal agencies and others. We always try to work with the state of Wyoming, and, you know, for the most part, you know, the scientists and the technical people, we get along really good with them. when you bring in the attorneys and the politicians, that's when things kind of start getting funny. But, you know, it's just really important to educate our people, utilizing our elders, basing our beliefs and our values, and helping our young people understand that and how that, you know, the way the elders taught us, everything was based on the natural law of reciprocity. You take care of us, we take care of you. So if we look at that, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem has been good to a lot of people. What are we doing to pay back? And so that's kind of the reciprocity that we instill in our young people, is that we have to always maintain that belief and that value. And that's, as long as we do that, we'll be all right.
More questions? Right there. I saw over here. Oh, yeah. Thought you were. Oh, she had her hand up first. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's on.
A question for Asa. I mean, does the government have any programs or policies for population control of predators?
National control of predators. Does the government have any programs for population control of predators?
Well, they do have these goals, the national goals. Yearly, they set these, and then they had the estimates, and they do inventories annually to estimate. And we do have like bear. We have a large population of bear, so there is a hunting season for them. So we can hunt bear in the fall, and we can also shoot off problem individuals year round when we document damage. But and also inventories are done for all species. Eagle, of course, is difficult because they, well, move. So that's hard to do inventories. But also when it comes to like wolverines, they are very difficult to find, and definitely in forest areas. And the yearly inventory are the base for then the occurrence of predators, and then also a factor for the compensation. So if you have, due to weather conditions or other factors, a very not successful inventory, that severely affects the compensation. So it's not really, it's very hard to estimate how accurate the inventories are to the actual occurrence. And this is where also the eyes and ears and the knowledge of herders are important. And we need a management system to also recognize the knowledge of the reindeer herders, because they are the ones that are out there and also can estimate. So we have that, the trust between the reindeer herding communities and the management systems and the authorities. We have a lot of work to do that there, to see that we have also to set common goals, because it's not a matter of we wanting to remove all the predators and they wanting to have as much as possible. We need the balance. So we need to find a way to set common goals so we can work together. And that's where I see a bit of work done in these parts that we can learn from, I think, to build trust between the authorities and management systems and work together with the indigenous peoples, because I think that's the balance is all that we are working for, and I think we can learn a lot from other parts of the world in that regard.
Thank you. Okay, they're saying we're done, and I don't want to get accused of being on native time here, so we're gonna thank our speakers again, and thank you all.